So in our lungs, we're going to go ahead and have air, we're still calling it air, come down the trachea. And we have to break that pipe down to smaller, so we can access more of those alveoli, which you'll see soon. And how we do that is we start to break it down almost like a tree. So we're going to be looking at things that kind of look like roots. We have our primary bronchi. And then our secondary bronchi is our next branching off points. Then we have our tertiary bronchi, and even there, you can't really see it in this picture, but they'll be quaternary, and we'll start to break those down, break those down, break those down, until we get to our alveoli. So we're seeing that we have our trachea, primary bronchi, and you can see as they're starting to branch off. And as they get smaller, what they're designed to do is basically feed these alveoli. And as air comes in, these alveoli will expand, and they almost look like grapes when they're expanded. And you can see that they're covered in arteries and veins. And what's happened here is blood comes to the alveoli, and they're going to be high in CO2. So they're going to dump that CO2 into the alveoli. Then what's going to happen is the air itself is going to be high in O2, so they're going to dump that O2 into the bloodstream, where they're going to get picked up by red blood cells and taken out. So there's this sort of dual diffusion going on at two different directions. And really, diffusion is just high to low till we get to equilibrium. In the lungs itself, we're going to have a high concentration of O2. In the blood itself, we're going to have a low concentration of O2, because keep in mind, this is coming back from our veins back to our heart, where we have to get oxygenated, and this is where we're going to get that oxygen from. Then, in return, the blood has been capturing CO2 from all parts of the body, and now they're here to dump it here into the lungs, and we're going to do that simultaneously. When the alveoli are filled and you take a breath out, these alveoli smush, and they smush to kind of push that air out. I almost want to describe them as a sponge, where an alveoli open is going to be a sponge filled with water. An alveoli closed is going to be when you kind of smush or put some pressure on that sponge, and all those holes get really small. And then as soon as you let go of that pressure on the sponge, the holes get bigger again. We've gone through this in lab, but you'll notice that we have 5 lobes of the lungs. We have 3 on one side and 2 on the other. The reason why we have 2 lobes on the other side is because the heart occupies that space, and we call that area the cardiac notch. We have some pleuras, and what's really happening here is that there's a thin film on the lungs, and there's going to be a thin film on the ribs itself, and even on the top of the diaphragm, and they're going to be filled with this visceral pleura. And what happens is that we create this area with a little bit of liquid and this thing called a surfactant, which is just a fancy name for soap. And we make it so our lungs can open and close without any friction. If we didn't have that liquid, we didn't have that soap, it's possible that the lungs could get stuck on the ribs or maybe have some friction, so it'll get harder to breathe. Also, that liquid reduces the spread of infection. Surfactant is soap, and it makes it so bacteria, if it does get on the outside there, dies. The alveoli themselves, they're small tubes. They kind of end at these alveoli sacs. You can kind of see these are pictures of them without the blood vessels. They kind of look like white grapes. When you see them with the blood vessels, they're just harder to see, but they're just these little sacs, and they're designed to increase surface area. There's different types of alveoli cells. They're really all designed to help do the same thing. We have type 1 squamous. Their real function is to do gas exchange. They form respiratory membranes, and they're going to be the epithelial cells that allow for gas exchange to occur. There's type 2 alveoli. And these are going to secrete that surfactant. Remember that surfactant is just a fancy name for soap, and that reduces surface area inside and outside the lungs. And it added with water, it makes it so it becomes that visceral liquid that we sort of talked about. And then we have our alveoli macrophages, and they're designed to anything that comes into the area, it's going to sort of mop up and destroy. Keep in mind that the lungs are still outside our body because if you take a deep breath, whatever is on the outside does get in our lungs. So we have to have in each alveoli sac, we have to have a macrophage designed to kill them and do whatever they need to do.